Write down the following terminology in your book. Cover. Cover, the outer layer that protects an animal or plant, like skin, fur, feathers, or scales. Pollinator. Pollinator, an animal, like a bee or butterfly, that helps move pollen from one flower to another. Endoskeleton. Endoskeleton, a skeleton inside the body that supports and protects it. Exoskeleton. Exoskeleton, a hard outer covering on the outside of the body that protects it. Vertebrates. Vertebrates, animals that have a backbone. Invertebrates. Invertebrates, animals that do not have a backbone. Flower petals. Flower petals, the colorful parts of a flower that attract pollinators. Skeleton. Skeleton, the framework of bones that supports and shapes the body. Ovule. Ovule, the part of a flower that becomes a seed after fertilization. 5.1 Animal shelters. Look at the two pictures the teacher gave you to paste, one of a farm and one of animals in a river or a dam. In both these pictures, there are different shelters for the animals. What do you think the difference between the two types of shelters in these pictures is? So if you look at the one on the farm, it's more domestic animals, and the one on the river is your wild animals. But there's a very big difference. The farm has been made by man, which is a man-made shelter. But the river and the reeds and the trees, that's all natural. So that is a natural shelter. It's not always possible for animals to rely on man-made shelters. All the habitats we looked at up until now were natural habitats in which the animals had to look for shelter themselves. Teacher will give you another set of photos. Please sort them out between natural and man-made. Now remember, natural is something that comes in nature. Humans had nothing to do with it. But man-made is not natural. Humans made the shelter. Animal shelters can be shell structures or frame structures. They can also have different forms and sizes. The type of structure, the form, and the size of the structure will have a direct connection to the build of the animal as well as to its needs. So, for example, if you have a iguana as a pet, a shelter in a fish tank will not satisfy its needs, and it will not survive. The iguana is not adapted to living underwater. Let's now look at different types of structures you can make for an animal. Firstly, we need to look at shell and frame structures. So, shell structures. Shell structures look basically like shells, as the word says. If your mom breaks open an egg, if the shell is broken, an animal would be able to find shelter under the shell. Shell structures keep their shape and can support weight even without any form or frame or any substance on the inside of the shell supporting it. These structures are usually thin and light, but strong to give protection and shelter to the animal. For example of shells, structures which you can see every day are tortoiseshells, an egg, a lobster, a boat, a plane, and a car. To show how strong a shell structure can be, if you go home this afternoon, take an egg and place it vertically between your next fingers and your thumb. Press hard. You will see that it doesn't matter how hard you press, you cannot break the egg. Then we look at frame structures. Frame structures are structures with a combination of beams, columns, and sections in between. All these parts have the purpose of letting the structure stand upright and enabling it to be strong enough to carry weight without collapsing. A frame structure is like the skeleton of a structure. Think of a leaf. When just the veins in the leaf are there, and not the leaf itself, we call it an open framework. A spider's web is a good example of an open framework. These shelters can also be made from any material. It is important to think of the needs of the animal that will be living in the shelter and also the effect nature will have on the material you want to use. For example, you can't use tissue to make a structure. As soon as it gets wet, it will break. It will not be a good choice to make a paper house for your dog. Firstly, it isn't strong enough. It will overturn the house or simply tear it apart. Secondly, the wet soil will let the paper disintegrate. And we're not even speaking of what will happen when it rains. It's clear that making a man-made shelter is not just a spur-of-the-moment activity, but that much thinking and planning go into making a successful shelter for an animal. To make a shelter for an animal, we make use of a technological process. The process you must always follow when designing and making structures. The technological process has 5 steps. 1 is investigation.
2 is design.
3 is building. 4 is evaluation. And 5 is communication. So how do these steps work specifically? The investigation is step 1, is when you look at the problem you want to solve. Let's take an example of making a suitable habitat for earthworms. So in step 2, now that you know what the problem is, the problem was I need to design a habitat for the earthworms. You design a place for the earthworms in which to live. This step includes deciding what you're going to do and what you will need to make the shelter. This step is very important as you have to consider the animal, its build and its needs, and also whether the material you want to use is suitable for the animal, its environment, and the weather conditions. Step 3, which was building, is the most pleasant of all the steps to do. Everything you have thought of and planned until now, you can now do on a practical level. This means you can now make the shelter with your chosen materials. Step 4 was evaluation. That means that you have to decide whether the shelter you have designed has solved the problem. To determine whether the problem has indeed been solved, you can ask yourself the following questions. Did the design solve the problem? Did I stick to the specific specifications and limitations? If you made any changes to the specifications, why did you do that? Or can you improve on your design?
And how?
So the last step is communication. In this step, you need to explain to others what you designed and made and why you decided on the specific type of design, size, and materials. Write down the last terminology of the term. Shell structure, a structure with a hard outer covering that protects what is inside. Man-made, something that is made by people, not by nature. Natural, something that comes from nature and is not made by people. Deforestation, the cutting down of many trees in a forest. Frame structure, a structure made from a skeleton or frame to hold it up. Technological process, the steps people follow to solve a problem or make something.